this week saw one of the strangest primetime Oval Office addresses from a US president ever. Donald Trump gave a weird, low energy speech on Iran that made it seem like we're in the Schrodinger's cat of wars. It could both end in 2 to 3 weeks, or we could bomb Iran into the Stone Age. These are both things that Donald Trump said at the exact same time. I was left wondering, Matt, as a former staffer, a former political operative, you're a campaign consultant. We both are hands in on this. What was the point? Matt, what purpose was this speech supposed to serve? And did it do that?
So this speech would have been amazing if it was 5 weeks ago when we started the war. But what we got was this regurgitated garbage, a bunch of sound bites that were absolutely meaningless. Look, I want to support this. Iran is a terrorist country. I wanted to hear from the president why we're doing this. What was the intelligence that showed a threat? But we still don't have those answers. I think this was one thing and one thing only. His poll numbers are in the toilet. The economy's on the brink of disaster. And Donald Trump thought he could talk his way out of this by going on prime time, hoping with all the war language that we use, this war porn that we talked about in earlier episodes, maybe bring back the young men who are leaving him in droves. This thing was actually a disaster. I think it probably hurt him more than helped him. I don't make a lot of sense of how this is going because I, quite frankly, would have advised something totally different.
You ever see a kid who's got a dad with like an ugly nose and a mom with like big ears, and you see the kid has gotten the worst features of both parents, and you're like, oh no, oh, I feel so bad. I feel so bad for this kid. That's what this speech was. It was like the bizarre love child of a start of war speech and an end of war speech. And it took the worst features of both and glommed them together. And what you got with it was this confusing mishmash. Now, the White House is saying on background to reporters, he was trying to level set. He was trying to kind of reframe expectations about what we're doing for people who aren't paying close attention to this, like high information voters and
Sure. Yeah.
insiders like you and me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't do that. It didn't explain anything new or really give a compelling justification for why we went to war in the first place, why we're going to somehow benefit. He said your grandchildren will be better off. And no explanation whatsoever for his magical thinking of, he literally said the Strait of Hormuz, it'll open naturally after this is done. Really?
Naturally.
What do you mean?
Naturally.
Like, we're not getting an epidural for the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, like naturally?
Let's talk about the White House ballroom because it also blew up this week when a federal judge stepped in and halted construction, saying the president can't just redesign the White House without Congress. And we learned it's not just the ballroom, there's a massive security complex being built underneath it. Bunker, hardened facilities. Trump railed on it on True Social, called it wrong, blast critics as lunatics. Matt, what are we going to do with this big, beautiful hole in the ground? Should we call HGTV with help of Wreck the White House? Maybe that's a good next one.
Let's bring in the Property Brothers. By the way, SNL did this amazing thing where Trump and Melania are there like for a Property Brothers rebuild. It's like, I need more space. Yeah, this is essentially the Donald Trump experience, right? He thinks, he really truly believes in what the Project 2025 wackos have said, which is this unitary executive theory. The plain English of that is he can do whatever the hell he wants. That's what he truly believes. And a federal judge slapped him down, as judges have been doing. About two-thirds of cases that have gone into the court system have turned against Trump so far. And that's because we actually have a balance of powers. This is obnoxious. It's ridiculous. It's a waste of money. It's a boondoggle. It's a slap in the face to people who have to work for a living and don't want to see $400 million of their money go into, as you said, a hole in the ground. But it's it's emblematic of everything that Trump believes. I can go to war without congressional authorization. I can slap tariffs on you with no congressional justification. I can do whatever I want.
Exactly. Look, maybe we need a ballroom. I don't have a problem with building a ballroom. What I have a problem with is you can't tear down the East Wing, subvert Congress, build a secret military bunker, claim you can do all with private funds. This is not your house. You have to go to Congress And it's time for Republicans to stop looking the other way when Trump does things that are obviously illegal. That's the job of Republicans in Congress. That's the job of Democrats in Congress. And it's only right now the Supreme Court or the judiciary system that seems to be doing their job and holding him actually accountable. We have a hole. Maybe that's what we're going to do. We'll just put a swimming pool.
Speaking of the judicial system slapping Trump back, we had a high stakes hearing at the Supreme Court that I alluded to in the Trump dump earlier this week, a hearing on Donald Trump's executive order intended to restrict birthright citizenship. It was actually a fascinating hearing to listen to. The justices were extremely skeptical, to say the least, but they did give a full hearing to the case that maybe the settled law on this, the interpretation of the 14th Amendment that we've had for over a century, maybe it was flawed. Matt, what should people be paying attention to?
Republicans are out there trying to talk about the problems with birthright citizenship. And they're talking about we have people coming into our country and there's this cottage industry. And before it was anchor babies, this is the conversations as they evolve. That's not the debate here. Birthright citizenship has been a common law practice since America's inception and a foundational principle since it was enshrined in the 14th Amendment. So the issue is not whether it's being abused or what's happening or the stupid arguments that Republicans are making to justify this dumbass executive order. The issue is it's the law. It's the Constitution. You can't change the Constitution with a stroke of a pen. If you want to change it, amend it. That's the process. And so I don't quite frankly care about what argument comes next because the issue is really executive power, what they can do, what they can't do, and how Trump is trying to systematically just push past those barriers using some campaign issue that he just doesn't have the legal right to do. And that's why my speculation is I think the court's going to throw this out. I think that's why Donald Trump stormed out after the first hour and a half of being there. And by the way, I could listen to this on TV down here in South Carolina. I didn't have to show up to hear those arguments. So it was a complete waste of his time going there. But I do think it gets kicked out because constitutionally he just can't do it.
My cynical slash realistic political operative brain says this is one of those where they're going to win by losing. The thinking inside the White House is they don't need to win the case. They need to have the argument. They need the attention drawn on to the one issue that they feel is at least a draw. This is still an issue that is highly polarizing and resonates with their base. And as long as people like you and me are talking about immigration, birthright citizenship, it's on ground that's much better for them than every other issue we could be talking about. So they could lose this case, they'll still see it as a political win.
That's 100% correct. And I think you nailed it. A lot of polls have come out over the last week. And I think part of it, that's why we're talking about with the primetime address, Trump's numbers are plummeting. Trump is almost more than 20 points underwater in approval. That is historically bad territory. But Democrats are not up 20. They may be up 4 or 5 points in a generic ballot. Things are just not lining up. Voters are this unhappy. Why is it not showing up more clearly in the race? Matt, what do you make of what's going on here?
What we're looking at here is a gap between Trump being about 20 points underwater and the generic ballot showing Democrats up. I'm going to do the meme that's now dead among the kids, 6 or 7 points. Being up 6 or 7 points on the generic ballot is pretty good. That's very close to the +8 territory the Democrats occupied in 2018 when they had an absolute blue wave landslide in the midterm elections. So it's not bad. But the question is, why are you not seeing like a 1-to-1? Trump and the Republicans are losing all these voters. Why aren't the Democrats gaining all these voters? I will say that there are some technical things going on here with who you're polling in each of these. That accounts for some of it. Some of it accounts for the fact that it's really hard when you're a political party that doesn't hold the presidency, doesn't hold majorities in either chamber of Congress to remake your brand. Shoot, it's hard to remake your brand just not holding the presidency. The reality for Democrats is that their brand is deeply underwater as a party, and they're not going to fix that until they embody their brand in a presidential standard bearer. Until there's a nominee who kind of stands for what the Democratic Party is supposed to be, voters are going to not update their view of the
Mhm.
Democratic Party. That's the issue going on that the polling's picking up. I will say, though, that there was news this week that Trump and therefore Mike Johnson have flip flopped on the Senate compromise to end the Department of Homeland Security shutdown. And the fact that they've caved to Democrats' demands means that Democrats are pitching a shutout on the shutdowns. That's two shutdowns that they've won politically. I think it's fair to say that Democrats are doing what they can do. They're controlling what they can control. Do they make mistakes? Sure. Are they being perfect? Definitely not. But they have racked up some wins here, and that is significant.
Part of this, I think, is by design. When your opponent is hanging themselves, and that's what Republicans are doing, Democrats have to get out of the way. And I think clearly what we see and the reason why some of these numbers don't line is they're not out there putting out issues. They're not putting out their platforms. They're not campaigning. They're doing the smart thing. They're just staying out of the way. And if I was advising Democrats, I would tell them, got another month or two of this where you just let Republicans implode and then kind of come in with it. I think the cautionary tale here is it can't be an all anti-Trump message. And that's going to be the temptation because if they do, they'll never realize those gains because Americans are past that. But I think those numbers don't line up right now just because it's the time in the cycle where they won't or shouldn't.
Speaking of Republicans imploding, let's turn the tables. You just prompted me with a question of why aren't Democrats doing a little bit better given the political environment? I'm going to turn the tables on you and
Yeah.
say, are Republicans doing as badly as they possibly could in this political environment? And the case and the evidence that I would offer is the Conservative Political Action Committee, the CPAC conference, which is the big confab for
Mhm.
Republicans, concluded last week. And coming out of it, it sure looked this week like Republicans were as divided and confused as they have ever been. Donald Trump continues to withhold an endorsement in the key
Mhm.
Texas Senate race because of the demands of the MAGA base, who seems to want to go all in on a very flawed candidate that exposed them to a loss. There were fractures evident at that conference. Now Trump is playing footsie with the idea of firing Pam Bondi. It does seem to be a Republican Party at odds with itself. You are a quintessential insider. Is this true? Is that perception right? What's going on?
For those who don't know, CPAC is the annual political conference that's been attended by conservative activists since the 70s. The inaugural kickoff was Governor Ronald Reagan, where he talked about American exceptionalism, a shiny city on the hill. CPAC wasn't just a powerhouse, it was the defining organization for conservatives and it packed the rooms, party atmosphere. It could make or break your campaign. And this year was just a mess. It wasn't just a bad CPAC. It exploded a generational split, war fatigue inside MAGA, a movement losing cultural momentum. And that's a problem because in our base is conservatives. That has always been our go to. And when you map out the numbers we need to win, and for those who sort of don't think and live and die by campaigns like I do all the time, we look at kind of how many Republicans we need, what's that percentage. We get about 91, 92% of the Republican vote. We get about, 7 or 8% of the Democrat vote. And depending on registration, that gets our model of how many swing voters and independents we need to go to. But our intensity, how we focus and divide our time is we know conservatives are going to show up for our candidates. When CPAC is starting to fail, we're seeing that less momentum. You're seeing conservatives who are not part of MAGA anymore. They don't like what they see, so they're leaving in droves. And then you see the Pam Bondi side of things. You can see even at the top in the White House, they're starting to see they have some serious problems and they're trying to do a bunch of Hail Marys whenever they can. I actually do think we have some serious infrastructure problems that I see every day when we're talking. I see it in polling. What we know with polling is a lot of this stuff is self identified. And I'm even starting to see when we're writing questions of like, are you MAGA? Are you more traditional? because we see that split happening over and over again. And it is a problem for us right now.